You cannot control what happens to you, but you can control how long you suffer from it. Most people spend their entire lives fighting against things they cannot change. They replay old conversations in their heads. They worry about futures that may never arrive. They exhaust themselves trying to make the world bend to their expectations. But the moment you stop resisting what is already real, your life begins to feel lighter. This is not about giving up. This is not about being passive. This is about redirecting your energy toward what actually matters. This is about learning to stand steady when everything around you feels uncertain. When something does not go the way you planned, it hurts. That is completely natural. No one enjoys disappointment. No one enjoys being let down by people they trusted. No one enjoys watching their hard work lead to results they did not expect. But what makes the pain last longer is not the event itself. What makes the pain last longer is the story you keep telling yourself about the event. You replay it over and over. You ask yourself why it happened. You wonder what you could have done differently. You imagine alternate versions of your life where everything turned out perfectly. And all of that mental repetition keeps the wound open far longer than it needs to be. The original moment may have lasted 5 minutes. But your thoughts about that moment can torture you for 5 months. That is the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is what happens to you. Suffering is what you do with it inside your own mind. Think about a time when someone said something that hurt you. Maybe it was a coworker. Maybe it was a family member. Maybe it was someone you considered a close friend. They said something careless or cruel. The conversation ended. They walked away. They probably forgot about it within an hour. But you carried those words with you for days. You replayed the conversation while lying in bed at night. You thought about what you should have said in response. You analyzed their tone and their facial expression. You wondered if they meant it the way it sounded. You felt the sting of those words every single time you thought about them. Here is what actually happened. The person spoke for maybe 10 seconds. But your mind replayed those 10 seconds hundreds of times. Each replay brought fresh anger or fresh sadness or fresh frustration. The original wound was small. But your thoughts made it enormous. This is what happens when you refuse to accept reality. You keep the pain alive by feeding it with your attention. You give it power by thinking about it constantly. You turn a single moment into a lifelong grievance. And none of that thinking changes what happened. The words were already spoken. The moment already passed. The only thing still happening is inside your own head. Acceptance does not mean you agree with what happened. Acceptance does not mean the other person was right. Acceptance does not mean you are weak. It simply means you acknowledge what is real. It means you stop arguing with the past. It means you stop demanding that reality should have been different from what it was. When you accept that something happened, you free yourself to move forward. You stop wasting energy on something you cannot undo. You stop poisoning your present moment with memories of the past. And you start putting your attention toward things you can actually influence. People have a deep need to feel recognized and valued by others. This is not a flaw. This is part of being human. From the time you were a child, you learned that approval meant safety and belonging. You learned that being liked meant being included. You learned that meeting expectations meant earning love. But somewhere along the way, this natural need became something more extreme. It became a compulsion to please everyone. It became an obsession with how others perceive you. It became a habit of changing yourself to fit whatever the people around you seem to want. And when you live this way, you lose yourself entirely. Your mood depends on whether your boss smiled at you today. Your confidence depends on whether your friend responded to your message quickly enough. Your sense of worth depends on how many people validated your last decision. This is an exhausting way to live. It means you are constantly performing. You are constantly monitoring other people for signs of approval or disapproval. You are constantly adjusting your behavior based on what you think will make others happy. And the cruel irony is that no matter how hard you try, you will never satisfy everyone. Someone will always misunderstand you. Someone will always disagree with your choices. Someone will always judge you based on their own biases and assumptions and past experiences. This has nothing to do with your value as a person. This is simply how human beings work. Everyone sees the world through their own lens. Everyone interprets your words and actions through the filter of their own life experience. Two people can hear the exact same sentence from you and walk away with completely different impressions. One person feels grateful for your honesty. The other person feels attacked by it. You did not change between those two interactions. You said the same words in the same tone with the same intention. But their interpretations were entirely different. Because their interpretations have nothing to do with you. Their interpretations come from their own history and their own insecurities and their own expectations. When you truly understand this, something shifts inside you. You realize that other people's reactions are not a reliable measure of your worth. You realize that chasing universal approval is not just difficult but genuinely impossible. You realize that the only opinion you can fully trust is the one you hold about yourself based on how you actually live your life. This does not mean you stop caring about other people. This does not mean you become cold or dismissive or arrogant. It means you stop outsourcing your self-worth. It means you build your confidence on a foundation that you control rather than on the shifting sands of other people's moods and preferences. A person named Marcus once spent 3 years trying to earn the respect of a supervisor who never seemed satisfied. No matter how many hours Marcus worked, no matter how many projects he completed successfully, the supervisor always found something to criticize. Marcus started doubting himself. He started wondering if he was truly incompetent. He lost sleep. He lost confidence. He started dreading every single workday. Then one day Marcus realized something important. The supervisor treated everyone that way. It was not personal. It was not about Marcus at all. The supervisor was operating from his own frustration and his own pressure and his own inability to express appreciation. Once Marcus accepted this truth, he stopped taking the criticism personally. He still worked hard. He still did his best. But he stopped allowing one person's inability to give praise to define his entire sense of self. That single shift in perspective changed everything for Marcus. He slept better. He felt lighter at work. He stopped replaying conversations in his head every night. He stopped seeking validation from someone who was never going to give it. And eventually he made the decision to move on to a company where his contributions were recognized. But the most important change happened before he left. The most important change was internal. He stopped needing that one person to approve of him in order to feel good about himself. This is what acceptance looks like in practice. It is not dramatic. It is not mystical. It is simply the moment you stop fighting against something you cannot control and redirect your energy towards something you can. Everyone has expectations about the people closest to them. You expect your parents to understand you because they raised you. You expect your partner to know what you need because you have been together for years. You expect your friends to support you because that is what friendship means. But these expectations often cause more pain than the relationships themselves. Because no one can read your mind. No one can perfectly anticipate your needs at every moment. No one can always say the right thing at the right time in the right way. Even the people who love you most will sometimes disappoint you. They will say things that hurt without realizing it. They will forget things that matter to you. They will prioritize their own needs over yours sometimes. And this is not because they do not care. It is because they are human beings with their own struggles and limitations and blind spots. When you expect perfection from the people around you, every single imperfection feels like a betrayal. Every forgotten detail feels like proof they do not care. Every misunderstanding feels like evidence that the relationship is failing. But when you accept that the people in your life are imperfect and limited just like you, something remarkable happens. You stop keeping score. You stop cataloging every small failure. You stop building a case against the people you love. And you start seeing them clearly for who they actually are rather than who you wish they would be. This does not mean you accept mistreatment. This does not mean you stay in relationships that consistently harm you. It means you stop expecting every person to fulfill every need. It means you stop placing the weight of your entire emotional world on one person's shoulders. It means you take responsibility for your own happiness rather than making other people responsible for it. A woman named Sarah spent years feeling resentful toward her mother. Sarah felt her mother never truly listened to her. Every conversation felt one-sided. Sarah would share something important about her life and her mother would respond by talking about herself or offering unsolicited advice or changing the subject entirely. For years Sarah tried everything to change this dynamic. She confronted her mother directly. She wrote letters explaining how she felt. She tried different approaches to starting conversations. Nothing worked. Her mother continued responding the same way she always had. And Sarah continued feeling hurt and frustrated after every interaction. Then Sarah made a difficult choice. She decided to accept that her mother was not going to change. This was not giving up on the relationship. This was simply acknowledging reality. Her mother was 70 years old. Her communication patterns were deeply established over decades of habit. She was not going to suddenly become the emotionally attuned listener Sarah wished she could be. Once Sarah accepted this, she adjusted her expectations. She stopped going into every conversation hoping for something that was never going to happen. She started appreciating the things her mother could offer rather than resenting the things she could not. She found other people in her life who could provide the deep listening she needed. And gradually the resentment faded. The relationship did not become perfect. But it became peaceful. And that peace was only possible because Sarah stopped demanding that reality be different from what it actually was. Time is the one resource you cannot earn back. You can lose money and make it again. You can lose a relationship and build a new one. You can lose your health and work to restore it. But you cannot recover a single minute that has already passed. Every moment you spend replaying the past is a moment you are not living in the present. Every hour you spend worrying about the future is an hour you are not using to build something today. This is not a philosophical concept. This is a practical reality that affects every aspect of your daily life. When you truly accept that your time is limited, your priorities become very clear very quickly. The argument you had with a stranger online last week suddenly seems completely unimportant. The grudge you have been holding against someone who wronged you 5 years ago suddenly feels like a waste of precious energy. The fear of what other people think suddenly seems like a poor reason to avoid living authentically. People who understand the value of time do not waste it on things that do not matter. They do not spend hours scrolling through content that adds nothing to their lives. They do not spend days ruminating over problems they cannot solve. They do not spend years in relationships or jobs that consistently make them miserable. They make choices based on what actually matters to them, and they accept the consequences of those choices without endless second-guessing. This is not about being perfectly productive every minute of every day. This is not about never resting or never enjoying leisure. It is about being intentional. It is about choosing how you spend your limited time rather than letting habit or fear or other people's expectations choose for you. Many people live as though they have unlimited time. They tell themselves they will pursue their real goals next year. They tell themselves they will have that important conversation eventually. They tell themselves there is always tomorrow. But tomorrow is not guaranteed for anyone. And even if tomorrow comes, you will be one day older with one less day available to you. This is not meant to create panic. This is meant to create clarity. When you accept that time is limited, you stop wasting it on things that do not align with what you truly value. You stop saying yes to obligations that drain you. You stop maintaining relationships out of pure obligation when they bring nothing positive to your life. You stop postponing joy because you are waiting for some perfect future moment that may never arrive. People often fear getting older, as though aging itself is the problem. But aging is not the real fear. The real fear is arriving at the end of your life and realizing you never actually lived it. The real fear is looking back and seeing decades spent trying to meet other people's standards rather than your own. The real fear is knowing you had dreams and desires and ambitions, but you were too afraid of judgment or failure to pursue them. When you accept that time moves forward regardless of what you do, something powerful happens. You stop waiting. You stop postponing. You stop telling yourself you need more preparation or more confidence or more permission from others. You simply begin. Even if you begin imperfectly. Even if you begin slowly. Even if you begin without knowing exactly where you are going. Because an imperfect start is infinitely better than a perfect plan that never gets executed. People get trapped by regret. They replay old decisions endlessly. They torture themselves with what might have been. They imagine alternate timelines where everything worked out perfectly because they made one different choice 10 years ago. But this is an illusion. You cannot know what would have happened if you had made a different choice. Maybe it would have been better. Maybe it would have been worse. Maybe it would have created an entirely different set of problems you cannot even imagine. Regret is only useful when it teaches you something you can apply going forward. If you regret not speaking honestly to someone you cared about, that regret can motivate you to be more honest in your current relationships. If you regret not taking better care of your health, that regret can motivate you to make better choices starting today. But regret that simply loops endlessly without producing any change in behavior is just self-punishment. It does not fix the past. It only ruins the present. A man named David spent nearly a decade regretting a business decision he made in his early 30s. He had an opportunity to start a company with a friend, but he chose the safer path and stayed at his corporate job instead. The friend went on to build a successful business. David watched from the sidelines, feeling like he had made the worst decision of his life. For years he told himself that one choice ruined everything. He believed he would have been wealthy and fulfilled and happy if only he had said yes. But he was building this entire alternate reality in his imagination. He had no actual evidence it would have worked out that way. Many new businesses fail. Many partnerships between friends collapse under pressure. Many entrepreneurs sacrifice their health and relationships for years before seeing any success. David was comparing his real life to a fantasy version of a life he never actually lived. Once he accepted that the past was unchangeable, he was able to look at his present with fresh eyes. He realized his corporate career had given him stability and skills and relationships he valued. He realized he could still start something of his own now, even though the timing was different from what he had imagined. He realized the only thing truly holding him back was his own attachment to a story about what should have been. Unhappiness visits every single person at some point. No one lives a life completely free from difficulty. People get sick. Relationships end. Jobs disappear. Financial pressures build. People you love pass away. Plans fall apart despite careful preparation. This is not pessimism. This is simply an honest description of what it means to be alive. The question is not whether you will face hardship. The question is how you will respond when hardship arrives. Some people collapse entirely under difficulty. They let one bad event define their entire identity. They become the person who was wronged, or the person who failed, or the person who lost everything. They build their whole life story around that one painful chapter. And they never move past it because they refuse to accept that it happened, and it is now part of their history. Other people experience the same hardships but respond differently. They feel the pain fully. They grieve what they lost. They acknowledge how unfair the situation may have been. But they do not stay there permanently. They eventually turn their attention forward. They ask themselves what they can do now given the reality they are facing. They take small steps even when the path ahead is unclear. This difference is not about being stronger or tougher or more resilient by nature. This difference is about the relationship you have with your own thoughts. When something difficult happens, your mind will naturally produce thoughts like "this should not have happened," or "this is not fair," or "my life is ruined." These thoughts feel absolutely true in the moment. They feel like facts. But they are interpretations. They are your mind's attempt to make sense of something painful. And while the pain is real, the catastrophic interpretations are not necessarily accurate. You can feel devastated by a loss and still recognize that your life is not actually over. You can feel deeply hurt by someone's actions and still recognize that this one event does not erase everything good in your life. You can feel afraid about the future and still recognize that fear is not the same as certainty about what will happen. This is what acceptance looks like in the face of hardship. It is holding space for the pain without letting the pain consume your entire perspective. It is acknowledging that something terrible happened without concluding that everything is therefore terrible. It is being honest about how much it hurts while also being honest about what is still intact and what is still possible. Think about a day when you had important plans and it started raining heavily. You cannot control the weather. You cannot make the rain stop. You can stand outside shaking your fist at the sky and telling yourself the whole day is ruined. Or you can grab an umbrella and adjust your plans and find a way to make the day work despite the rain. Neither response changes the weather. But one response leaves you soaking wet and miserable, while the other keeps you moving forward. Larger problems work the same way. When you face a situation you cannot change, you have two options. You can exhaust yourself fighting against reality. Or you can accept what is happening and redirect your energy toward whatever constructive action is still available to you. This applies to health problems. It applies to financial setbacks. It applies to the end of relationships you thought would last forever. It applies to career disappointments. It applies to aging and all the physical changes that come with it. In every single case, the pattern is the same. The situation causes a certain amount of unavoidable pain. Then your resistance to the situation creates additional unnecessary suffering on top of that unavoidable pain. Acceptance reduces the second layer. It does not eliminate the first. You will still feel sad when relationships end. You will still feel frustrated when plans fall apart. You will still feel afraid when the future looks uncertain. But you will not add weeks and months of additional misery by refusing to acknowledge what has already happened. A woman named Rachel received a serious health diagnosis in her early 40s. The news was devastating. For the first few weeks she could not stop thinking about how unfair it was. She was healthy. She exercised. She ate well. She did everything right. So why was this happening to her? She spent those early weeks consumed by anger and disbelief. She kept searching for a reason. She kept asking why. But there was no satisfying answer. Sometimes difficult things happen to people who do not deserve them. That is not a comforting truth, but it is still a truth. Eventually Rachel realized that the time she spent being angry about her diagnosis was time she was not spending on treatment and recovery. It was time she was not spending with the people she loved. It was time she was not spending doing the things that brought her joy. The diagnosis was real. It was not going away because she refused to accept it. But her quality of life during treatment could still be influenced by how she chose to spend her days. She started focusing on what she could control. She followed her treatment plan carefully. She asked for help when she needed it. She spent more intentional time with people who mattered to her. She stopped wasting energy on anger about something she could not undo. And while her health challenge was far from easy, her experience of it became more bearable once she stopped fighting against the basic fact of its existence. Money creates enormous stress for many people. Financial pressure can make everything else in life feel harder. When you are worried about paying bills or covering unexpected expenses, it is difficult to think about anything else. The anxiety takes over. It affects your sleep. It affects your relationships. It affects your ability to focus and make clear decisions. But here too the pattern of unnecessary suffering applies. The actual financial situation creates a certain amount of genuine stress. Then the catastrophic thinking about what might happen creates additional layers of anxiety that make everything feel worse than it already is. You imagine losing everything. You imagine being unable to provide for your family. You imagine a future of permanent struggle and deprivation. And these imagined scenarios feel completely real even though they have not happened yet. Acceptance in financial difficulty means looking honestly at the numbers. It means acknowledging exactly how much money you have and exactly how much you owe and exactly what your options are. It means making a realistic plan rather than avoiding the problem or spiraling into panic. It means asking for help if you need it without seeing that as a sign of failure. It means taking one concrete step today rather than being paralyzed by the enormity of the overall situation. People who accept difficult financial realities often find they are more capable of solving problems than they realized. When you stop catastrophizing and start problem solving, you often discover options you could not see when you were consumed by fear. You discover that you can reduce expenses in ways you had not considered. You discover that there are resources and support systems available. You discover that the situation, while difficult, is not actually hopeless. Change is constant. Nothing in your life will remain exactly as it is right now. The job you have today may not exist in 5 years. The relationship you are in right now will evolve and shift in ways you cannot predict. The body you have today will change as the years pass. The city you live in will transform around you. Your own interests and values and priorities will shift as you gain new experiences. People resist change because it feels threatening. The familiar feels safe even when it is not particularly good. The unknown feels dangerous even when it might be better than what you currently have. So people cling to routines and relationships and identities that no longer serve them simply because those things are known and predictable. But clinging to the past does not prevent change from happening. It only prevents you from adapting to it gracefully. The person who refuses to accept that a relationship has ended keeps suffering long after the other person has moved on. The person who refuses to accept that their industry is changing gets left behind, while others adapt. The person who refuses to accept that their body needs different care at 40 than it did at 20 keeps pushing until something breaks. Change is not something that happens occasionally. Change is the fundamental nature of existence. Everything is always in motion. Seasons change. Bodies change. Minds change. Relationships change. Economies change. Technologies change. Cultural norms change. Everything you see around you right now is temporary. This is not a sad thought. This is a liberating one. Because if everything changes, then no difficult period lasts forever. If everything changes, then new opportunities are always emerging. If everything changes, then who you are right now does not have to be who you are forever. You can grow. You can evolve. You can learn. You can become someone different from who you were last year or last decade. But this growth only happens when you stop clinging to old versions of yourself. It only happens when you accept that the person you used to be may not be the person you need to be going forward. Many people feel enormous pressure to follow a specific timeline. They believe they should have achieved certain things by certain ages. They compare their progress to the progress of people around them. They feel like failures if they have not hit specific milestones by the time society says they should. But life does not follow a single predetermined path. Some people find their calling in their 20s. Others do not find it until their 50s. Some people build stable lives early and then watch everything collapse in midlife. Others struggle for decades before everything finally comes together. There is no single correct timeline for a human life. The person who starts late is not behind. They are simply on a different schedule. The person who changes direction is not failing. They are simply responding to new information about themselves and the world. The person who has not figured everything out yet is not broken. They are still in the process of becoming who they are meant to be. Your body will change as you age, and this is something every person must eventually accept. The energy you had at 20 is not the same energy you will have at 40 or 60. The recovery time your body needed after exertion increases as years pass. Your metabolism shifts. Your sleep patterns change. Your skin changes. Your joints change. Everything changes. People who fight against these physical changes often end up miserable. They compare their current body to their younger body and feel nothing but loss. They see photographs from 10 years ago and feel sadness instead of gratitude for the experiences those years contained. They push their bodies past reasonable limits because they refuse to accept that they need to adjust their approach. But accepting physical change does not mean giving up on your health. It means taking care of your body based on what it needs now rather than what it needed 20 years ago. It means adjusting your exercise routine to match your current capacity. It means prioritizing sleep and nutrition and recovery. It means being kind to yourself about the changes that are completely natural and unavoidable. Getting older brings losses, but it also brings gifts. You gain perspective you did not have when you were young. You develop the ability to see what truly matters versus what merely seemed urgent in the moment. You learn to read people better. You become less reactive to small provocations. You develop patience and wisdom that only come from lived experience. These gifts are valuable even though they are less visible than youth and physical vitality. Accepting yourself is perhaps the most challenging form of acceptance. Many people spend their entire lives wishing they were somehow different. They wish they were more outgoing or more intelligent or more attractive or more talented or more confident. They compare themselves endlessly to other people and always find themselves lacking. They believe that if they could just change this one thing about themselves, everything would fall into place. But you are who you are. You have a specific set of strengths and a specific set of limitations. You have a particular temperament and a particular set of natural abilities. You have a body that looks a certain way and a mind that works a certain way. Some of these things can be developed and improved over time. Others are simply part of your fundamental nature. The quiet person does not need to become loud to be valuable. The sensitive person does not need to become tough to be strong. The person who thinks slowly and carefully does not need to become quick and spontaneous to be successful. Every temperament has its own unique strengths. Every personality type has something valuable to offer. The problem comes when you spend your whole life trying to be someone you are fundamentally not. When you force yourself into a mold that does not fit, you exhaust yourself and produce poor results. You perform a version of yourself that feels fake to you and often to others as well. You spend enormous energy maintaining an image rather than simply being who you are. Accepting yourself means knowing your strengths and building your life around them. It means acknowledging your weaknesses honestly without using them as reasons for self-hatred. It means understanding that your pace is your pace. Your style is your style. Your path is your path. It does not need to look like anyone else's path to be valid. A man named Thomas spent years trying to be as socially outgoing as his older brother. His brother was charming and effortlessly popular. He could walk into any room and immediately connect with everyone there. Thomas was quieter and more reserved by nature. Social gatherings drained him. Small talk felt exhausting and pointless. For years Thomas believed something was wrong with him. He forced himself to attend every social event. He tried to mimic his brother's easy confidence. He felt like a fraud every single time. And no matter how hard he tried, the performance never felt natural. Eventually Thomas stopped comparing himself to his brother and started paying attention to his own strengths. He realized he was an excellent listener. He formed deep, meaningful connections with a small number of people rather than shallow connections with many. He was thoughtful and observant in ways his more gregarious brother was not. When Thomas stopped trying to be someone else, he finally felt at peace with who he actually was. He built a life that suited his temperament rather than fighting against it. He chose a career that valued depth over breadth. He cultivated a small circle of close relationships rather than a large network of acquaintances. He stopped measuring his social success by his brother's standards and started measuring it by his own. Impulses and desires are part of being human. You will feel the pull of instant gratification. You will feel urges to say things you should not say. You will feel tempted to make choices that feel good in the moment but create problems in the long term. Accepting that these impulses exist does not mean acting on all of them. It means acknowledging them honestly without shame, and then choosing deliberately how to respond. The person who pretends they never feel anger or jealousy or temptation is not actually free from those feelings. They are just suppressing them. And suppressed feelings tend to emerge in destructive ways eventually. The person who accepts that these feelings are normal and human can observe them with curiosity rather than judgment. They can say to themselves, I notice I feel angry right now. I notice I feel envious right now. I notice I feel the urge to say something hurtful right now. And then they can choose not to act on that feeling. This is the difference between being controlled by your emotions and being informed by them. Emotions provide valuable information. Anger tells you a boundary has been crossed. Sadness tells you something important has been lost. Fear tells you something feels threatening. These signals are useful. But acting impulsively on every emotion without reflection usually creates more problems than it solves. Acceptance is a practice, not a destination. You do not arrive at acceptance once and stay there permanently. You will have days when you fall back into old patterns. You will have moments when you resist reality and fight against things you cannot change. You will have times when other people's opinions shake your confidence, and when regret pulls you back into the past, and when fear of the future paralyzes your present. This is normal. This is part of being human. The practice is simply noticing when it happens. The practice is catching yourself in the act of resistance and gently redirecting your attention. It is noticing that you have been replaying an old conversation for 20 minutes and choosing to bring your focus back to what you are doing right now. It is noticing that you are catastrophizing about something that has not happened yet and choosing to deal with it when and if it actually arrives. It is noticing that you are comparing yourself to someone else and choosing to return your attention to your own path. Each time you notice and redirect, you strengthen the habit. Over time, the old patterns lose their grip on you. The conversations you used to replay for days might only bother you for hours. The criticisms that used to devastate you might sting for a moment, and then fade. The changes that used to terrify you might start to feel more like adventures than threats. This does not happen overnight. It does not happen perfectly. But it happens gradually and consistently for anyone who practices it with patience. The person who practices acceptance does not live a life free from problems. They live a life where problems take up less mental and emotional space. They still feel pain. They still experience disappointment. They still face challenges. But they do not add unnecessary layers of suffering on top of what life naturally brings. They feel the rain and grab an umbrella rather than standing outside cursing the sky. They feel the sting of criticism and set a boundary rather than losing sleep for a week. They feel the grief of loss and allow themselves to mourn rather than pretending everything is fine. They feel the fear of change and take a small step forward rather than remaining frozen indefinitely. This is what it means to live with acceptance. It is not a passive surrender to whatever happens. It is an active choice to engage with reality as it is rather than as you wish it would be. It is a decision to spend your limited energy on things you can actually influence rather than things that are permanently beyond your control. When you accept other people as they are, your relationships become less exhausting. You stop trying to fix everyone. You stop expecting them to be who they are not. You stop taking their behavior so personally. You respond to who they actually are rather than who you need them to be. When you accept that time is limited, your days become more intentional. You stop wasting hours on activities that do not matter to you. You stop postponing the things that actually bring meaning to your life. You start treating every day as the valuable and unrepeatable gift it truly is. When you accept that difficulty is a normal part of life, you stop being surprised and devastated every time something goes wrong. You develop the ability to face problems calmly and practically. You maintain your equilibrium even when circumstances are chaotic and uncertain. When you accept that change is constant, you stop clinging to versions of your life that no longer exist. You adapt. You evolve. You find new ways of being that match who you are becoming rather than who you used to be. When you accept yourself fully, you stop exhausting yourself by pretending to be someone else. You build a life that fits your actual nature rather than performing a life designed to impress people whose approval you do not actually need. Peace of mind does not come from having a perfect life with no problems. Peace of mind comes from knowing the difference between what you can change and what you cannot. It comes from putting your energy in the right places. It comes from letting go of the things that are not yours to carry. It comes from trusting that even when things do not go according to plan, you have the ability to handle whatever comes. This is not an extraordinary skill that only certain people possess. This is a basic capacity that exists within every human being. You already have everything you need to practice acceptance. You already have the ability to notice your thoughts. You already have the ability to redirect your attention. You already have the ability to choose your response rather than simply reacting on autopilot. The only question is whether you will practice this consistently. The only question is whether you will choose awareness over habit. The only question is whether you are willing to let go of the illusion of control and embrace the freedom that comes from acceptance. Life will never be entirely within your control. People will disappoint you. Plans will fail. Bodies will age. Circumstances will shift. Time will pass faster than you want it to. This is the nature of being alive. But within that reality, you always have a choice about where to place your attention and how to spend your energy. You always have the ability to notice when you are suffering unnecessarily and make a different choice. You always have the power to accept what is already done and focus on what is still possible. That choice made consistently over time is what separates people who feel constantly overwhelmed from people who maintain their inner stability regardless of what is happening around them. It is not that stable people have easier lives. It is that they have learned to stop adding extra weight to the burdens life naturally brings. They carry what is theirs to carry. They set down what is not. And they keep walking forward one step at a time, trusting that the path will become clearer as they move along it. Happiness is not the absence of problems. Happiness is the presence of meaning and purpose and connection even in the midst of difficulty. It is the feeling of being aligned with your own values regardless of external circumstances. It is the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are living honestly and intentionally even when the world around you feels chaotic. You do not need everything to be perfect to feel at peace. You need to know that you are doing what you can with what you have. You need to know that you are treating yourself and others with basic decency and compassion. You need to know that you are spending your limited time on things that actually matter rather than things that merely feel urgent or obligatory. When you know these things about yourself, external validation becomes less important. Other people's opinions become less threatening. Setbacks become less devastating. Because your sense of stability comes from within rather than from circumstances that are always changing. This is the deepest form of acceptance. Accepting that you are enough as you are right now. Not the future version of yourself who has achieved everything. Not the past version who had fewer responsibilities. The version of you that exists in this exact moment with all your imperfections and limitations and unrealized potential. You are enough right now. And life as it exists right now with all its messiness and uncertainty and imperfection is enough to work with. You do not need to wait for conditions to improve before you start living fully. You can start right here. You can start right now. With whatever you have. With whoever you are. That is acceptance. And that is freedom.